As soon as I got my results that I passed FE, I emailed you like I'm right away going into PE using the same momentum I had gained from FE, which kind of helped me. I had my mindset, I had my attitude or aptitude towards that study. So the course was very structured and organized, and it was going the way the PE reference book is going. So that was very helpful. Like I would know where I am at in reference to how much I'm covering from the reference book itself.
Hi, Chaitanya. Thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate you scheduling this call, and you have some good news to share with us. You passed the FE Electrical and Computer exam a little while ago using Study for FE exam preparation resources, and then you jumped into the PE Power exam preparation right away without any break. I don't remember, like we can discuss the timelines and whatnot, but as far as I remember, you didn't take any break and you just dived into it. So let's start with your FE Electrical and Computer exam preparation journey. When did you start thinking about it? How long it took you to prepare? Which resources you used, and so on?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It is great to share this experience. For FE, I got serious about it sometime last year in October, and I started studying for it. And I was studying on and off, and I stumbled upon your courses, on-demand course, as well as your practice exam and study books. And I decided to enroll for the on-demand course at one time, and I also bought your study guide, which is the third edition, I guess.
Yeah, the black and blue book at the background.
The black and blue book, yes. So those were the two main resources for me for FE. And I studied on and off. I say on and off because there was a winter storm in Texas in February. So that put me back off my schedule a little bit. So I would say about 3 months or so, I studied on myself, remembering most of stuff from my bachelor's, from your video lectures, and from that study guide. And then I decided to take my FE in March earlier this year. And that is when I passed FE.
In 2021. So you started in October 2020 with a little bit of breaks and hiccups, and then you finally pulled it off in March 2021. So that's about 6 months of effort. That's great. And just for reference, when did you graduate from your undergraduate program?
So my bachelor's I completed in 2007 back home from India. And
so
then
about 14 years ago.
Yeah, and master's was 2011 here in US.
I see. So you're an internationally trained engineer. I know when you enrolled in my FE course and when you passed the exam, I mean, all along the way, you were asking some high quality questions, and I had no doubt that, you'd get it done in the first attempt. But as soon as you cleared your FE electrical exam, you essentially dived into the PE almost right away. But there was a challenge that you had to overcome in between. And that was the fact that since you're an internationally trained engineer, you had to get the board approval and get the credentials evaluated, right? So I have a lot of students, both in FE and my PE Power courses, who are internationally trained engineers. I try to help them out with that process as well. But if you can share some of the best practices and things that helped you sort of smoothen that process, I think a lot of viewers would benefit from it as well.
Yeah, sure. So studying for PE is one thing, and then application process itself is a different game of PE, and it takes its own timing, right? The board review itself takes about a month, and to gather all the documents, if you are a particularly international student like me, would add some time on top of it. So in my case, I had to get transcripts from my university from India, and it was particularly difficult because of the COVID situation in India. A lot of people were not working, or they were working with half staff. So I had too much difficulty getting my transcripts, but somehow it worked out. So my advice to other guys who are like me is to get, once you decide to take PE, start your application process or gathering documentation right away, because you don't know how long it is going to take. Some things are beyond your control. The only thing you could do is follow up. You can't physically go there unless you have friends and family who can pick it up for you. But yeah,
but even then, like friends and family cannot pick it up basically, right? Because you have to really have somebody sent out to your university, right? Unless it's electronic documentation, and then they basically, the university has to send the transcripts directly to the board,
That is
right?
good. Yeah, they have to send
Yeah.
directly to the Texas board. But in my university, there was an option to fill out a form where I would sign it myself and I would give it to the other person, and they will verify that I have authorized that person to collect the transcript.
Right. Yeah. So you have to have boots on the ground. You have to
Right.
have somebody physically present, right?
That is
Now,
true.
for other internationally trained engineers, maybe if your university has an electronic system where you can do it remotely, I think that would be, obviously that would reduce the overhead that, or the stress that you went through. But in a lot of cases, getting these transcripts takes time. So plan it into your schedule, as
Yes.
Chaitanya, you did. I think in your case as well, I kept on telling you that, you know what, let's keep moving forward with the exam preparation process,
Yeah.
but it will always be at the back of your mind, right?
Right.
I think that until unless you got all the ducks in the row, you really were not 100% committed, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that was other point I was going to say, that once you start that process, there's something in the back of the mind that you are actually doing something towards a milestone, right? So that
Yeah.
also, just initiating that application process puts a healthy pressure on you that you are going into the right direction. I must study. Otherwise, all I'm doing right now for the application is not fruitful. So that's kind of a healthy pressure that I had.
Right. And you used NCS credential evaluation. That is what I recommend to all of my students. I know there are some other options out there as well, depending on your state board.
Yes.
But definitely use, in my opinion, consider NCS credential evaluation, because it is a one-stop shop. And then your NCS record is going to hold all of your references, credential evaluation. So let's say today you move from Texas to California, and then in future you go to New York or wherever, then NCS record, essentially it's very simple electronic, and it will transmit all of your references and everything from one state board to another state board. So that's a huge plus.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. Thanks for sharing that, Chaitanya. Let's move on to then P-Power exam preparation phase. So
Mhm.
when did you exactly start your exam preparation? Which resources you used? The challenges you faced? So we are going to uncover each one of them one by one. So let's start with the timeline.
Sure. So I passed my FE in March. So I was waiting for my results. So that was about 1 week until I got my results that I passed FE. That was the only time I took a break from studying PE. As soon as I got my results that I passed FE, I emailed you like I'm right away going into PE using the same momentum I had gained from FE, which kind of helped me. I had my mindset, I had my attitude or aptitude towards that study. So I kept that, and I emailed you, what is that you have right now for PE, because that is the first time I started discussing about PE with you.
Yeah,
So, of course, I had already enrolled for your PE Power course. So I had that. And then I bought your study guide from Amazon. That was my primary resources for the entire PE study, your on-demand course and your study guide. And they both were extremely good in quality and content. And what in my mind, I was going to bed every day by studying something related to PE,
that's
either
great.
from
Yeah,
your study book or from the video itself. I can assure you there was not a single day from March until the October where when I actually took the PE, there was not a single day where I did not touch either of that,
right.
um, and that was something. If I was about to go to bed, and if I hadn't touched it, I wouldn't feel
Yeah,
comfortable, because I was set on something to achieve. So that on-demand course, I was studying every day. Like I would start around 11 in the night after my full-time schedule and family stuff, and then I would go on until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And then, that's what my schedule was on the weekdays. And on weekends, I would study as much as I can.
yeah.
But that was typical timeline, daily 11 to 1 or 2.
Right. And so I think this is a very good segue to a very important question that a lot of students ask. And I think in your case, given the fact that we were interacting and corresponding, and you had already taken my FE course and FE resources and were moving over to PE. So I think the transition was relatively seamless. But the point I want to make over here is that even I could clearly see the difference in the level of effort, stress, commitment, dedication, whatever you want to call it, that you brought to the table when it came to the PE Power exam preparation as compared to FE. in FE, you were able to sort of cruise through and off and on. Maybe you were not that set upon the target of getting the PE license, or it was not an aggressive goal of yours at that point in time. So why this much level of effort for PE compared to, let's say, a little bit of a casual approach? Although with the FE as well, you were able to get it done in the first attempt. And obviously, I mean, you must have done well in your undergraduate and graduate studies as well. But my question is that what made you uh, uh, become so serious and so committed and so diligent about preparing for PE versus FE? Was it the impression you got of PE? Was it the fact that you were just one step away from your PE license and you wanted to get it done in the first shot? Definitely. So yeah, tell me a
Um,
little bit more about that.
when I was studying for FE, I thought it is more of a plug and play. Like if you knew the formula, you're going to hit the answer, you know. But for PE, it was more of both. Like you have to know the formula, you have to know the concept. I thought, and by reading over the internet and just, browsing through your videos, it was my impression that PE is way difficult than FE. The
Yes,
approach for the PE is absolutely different than FE. So I did not want to go in with the same assumption that I passed FE on the flyers, that will same thing happen with PE, because I did not want to go into that direction at all. So I
right.
was going in with a zero mindset that I don't know what PE is. Let's attack it the way I can.
That's
And
great.
that's why I decided to study very seriously about it. And that's why you were seeing like late night emails from me about, questions and problems and that.
Well, that's great. That, you know what, for those who are watching this, I really want you to take this advice, because I've had some FE students who sort of move into the PE with the same mindset. So in your case, and I know that in my welcome video and sometimes during the lectures and during the course, I actually reminded that, guys, this is different. PE is a different ball game. Okay, it's a lot more interesting than FE, but PE power is much more difficult, right? So that was your impression before taking the exam. Did that impression, was it accurate after taking the exam when you compare your PE exam versus your FE exam?
It was same. Like I didn't overthink or anything. PE is
Mhm.
different. So my advice to other students is again that when you are studying for PE, try to learn the concept. It's not
Yes.
FE reference book type of exam, meaning you don't have to just know the formula. You definitely have to know the concept. The problems are typically covering a couple of different things from PE reference book, like per unit or short circuit. All of that is
But
combined
those
into.
formulas are already there, right? So that is true for FE as well. The formulas are there,
Well, I'm
but you
saying
need to
like the
have
concept,
understanding.
yeah,
Yes.
like when to
Yes.
use per unit concept versus when to use short circuit concept in that single problem is
Yeah.
something that PE brings to the table, and you definitely have to understand what they are asking, because they will throw a lot of different information that is not even relevant, and
Right.
something that you think is not relevant is the main point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. And how did the course help you, Chaitanya? How did the on-demand P-Power course with 100 plus lectures and computer simulated practice exam, how did that help you in gaining that in-depth understanding? I know that you're a pretty smart engineer. You actually deal with the code as well on a regular basis, and your job is more technical in nature than managerial, right? So all of that helps, but still, knowing what you had to know for the exam and having taken the exam and passed it in the first attempt, how do you think that the course assisted you in achieving this goal?
So the course was very structured and organized, and it was going the way the PE reference book is going. So that was very helpful. Like I would know where I am at in reference to how much I'm covering from the reference book itself. And you also had some lectures that are not specifically called out in the PE reference book. Like for example, there are protection or relaying concepts that are just called out in the exam specification books, but those are not in the reference book itself. So those lectures were helpful. The lecture timeline was helpful. Like you had about 30 or 40 minutes of a lecture, one
Generally
video
30
that time.
minutes,
Yeah.
generally under 30 minutes. Yeah.
Right. So that kind of helped me because I was working full time. So even if I finished one lecture, I had a sense of accomplishment that okay, I finished something from
Yes.
start to end. So that kind of gave me like a morality boost, that there is a bar on the video lecture how much I'm
Yes.
completing on the top left. So as soon as it is moving, it was giving me a good feeling that I'm getting
Yes.
into something. So the content was also good. There are some practice exams like in between the lectures or after the lectures. Those were good. And my approach was I would study a lecture and then I would jump back to the study guide of the same lecture set, and I would solve problems there. So I wouldn't
Yes.
start like I wouldn't finish 4 or 5 lectures of different topics and then jump to the study guide. I wanted to make sure I listen to the lecture and then I'm attempting the right problems in the right manner. Then I would
Right.
move. So it was kind of back and forth between lecture, study book, lecture, study book, lecture, study book.
Okay, that's great. And at the end of the course, obviously, you did the computer simulated practice exam, which I offer to all the students who are enrolled in the course free of cost. So how helpful was that computer simulated practice exam, Chaitanya, in rounding up your knowledge and consolidating what you had done over several months?
Yeah, so that exam was really helpful. It was again as expected, like structured and based around the PE Power reference book itself. So it was more relatable to the actual PE exam or the actual NCEES exam because the you attempted in the same manner, like very close to the reality. And the other thing is that before attempting that actual CBT, I made sure once I'm finished with all your lectures and I study guide, I wanted to make sure I remember what I studied from the beginning, because towards the end, you are about 6 months, 8 months, whatever from the start point, you're likely to forget what you studied before.
Exactly.
As I was going through, I was making my own notes. And then based on those notes, I started to solve random problems from your study book that I had already solved. And I wanted to make sure I remember it, because the first time I solved it, I had a fresh knowledge from your lectures and I was attempting it. So I was
Right.
able to solve it. But later, if I was not able to solve it like 6 months, 8 months down the line, I would know that I'm forgetting something. So I would go back to your lectures and then make sure that I understood the concept and move on. And after I was comfortable that I'm able to remember most of it, then I attempted your CBT. I took like a week or 2 weeks gap after I finished the lectures and study guide to reconsolidate my notes. And then I took CBT and I found it very helpful. It was very good. And the solutions given in the CBT also were very detailed. I had
Yeah.
hardly any question about it.
Yeah, the computer simulated practice exam solutions you're talking about.
Yes.
That's good. So you're clearly putting in a lot of effort, and then you use another resource, NCEES sample exam,
Yes.
which obviously comes from the source directly. I highly recommend students to go through that. In fact, I recommend students to actually go through it as soon as possible, because it might throw you off a little bit in the sense that the way that the questions are asked, or sometimes they're a little bit convoluted. Uh, so how did you tackle that NCS sample exam? I know you went back and forth with me several questions, but let me ask you this: how did you think that it was a did you think that the actual exam was easier, or the NCS sample exam was easier?
I thought actually exam was easier, honestly.
Yeah, maybe at that point in time you had done so much
Yeah.
preparation,
Yeah.
but you would definitely recommend students to do the NCS sample exam,
Yes,
right?
yeah, definitely. That is the closest you can get to the actual PE exam from official resource. So, and I'm sure that once you solve the problems, you might have some questions. You want to set aside time to discuss with your mentor, like Wasim, to
Yeah.
go through the questions that you have. Because if you're really, really studying, you're going to have questions.
Yes,
in the exam.
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
Because those subtle differences,
yeah,
only if your knowledge level is up to here, you're
yeah,
able to spot them. Otherwise, you're just gonna cruise through it thinking that, you know what, oh, this is a solution. Okay, I'll try and keep that in mind. But if
yeah.
you're questioning as to why that is a solution and why not this one, and there are a lot of those cases where the answers you can go in multiple directions. So they've done a good job, I think, at trying to, make those questions challenging. Uh, but you found the actual exam to be a little bit easier, which
Yes.
means that you were definitely over prepared. Now, my last question is regarding timing.
Mhm.
So if I remember correctly, you had an additional hour or 2 hours to spare,
Yes.
right? So you
Yes.
got the morning session done in 3 hours or something?
Yeah, yeah. Morning session 3 hours, afternoon session 3 hours.
So you had like 2 hours basically to yourself, which
Yes.
tells me that you were probably a little bit over prepared. But that is the right place to be, especially with the PE.
Yes.
I know that since December 1st, 2020, the PE exam is computer based all year round, so it's not as stressful when I took my PE exam. it was only twice a year. Some of the PE exams are still twice a year, April and October. So if you, for whatever reason, end up failing the exam, then you have to wait another 6 months, get the board approval, and it gets a very messy, right?
Yes.
So be over prepared like Chaitanya, use the right resources, put in the time and effort, and don't be complacent. This is a difficult exam. You need to be spending every single minute of your time effectively, okay? Not going in circle. Another thing I really liked about your preparation, which I really recommend a lot of students, and I would say majority of my students, both in FE electrical and the PE power, take this approach. That is, they move sequentially, right? So they move in one direction. There are some students who sort of get in a loop. They're like, hey, you know what, this particular topic is difficult, so I'm going to review it this week, and then next week I'm going to circle back to it, and 3 weeks later I'm going to circle back to it. This way they're not able to make that progress. You mentioned about that bar moving, showing your progress, right? I think
Yes.
psychologically it is a very important thing to have, because time is going to keep on moving, right? March is going to turn into April, then summer is going to come around, June, July, August. So that never stops, but you want to see that you are progressing. Reviewing stuff, consolidating is important. And I believe that the approach I have shared with students within my course, and when I interact with them one-on-one Zoom calls, I've done published some videos on YouTube as well, is that you gotta do one review of the course in depth, then keep a list of things that are bugging you, do another round of review, then use the practice exams. And when you do all of these things and are asking the right questions, putting in the right amount of time, you are really moving towards your goal. Otherwise, looping in circles, no matter how much time you're spending, it is not smart studying,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yes. And other advice I would give is solve as many problems as you can. That is the only way you can be comfortable in uncomfortable situation.
Right.
And I, if I were to say I was able to solve problems, typically you have 6 minutes to solve a problem. I don't think I would take more than 4 minutes if I knew the answer to solve the problem. So you have to be like that so that you can
Or the
save.
approach. You don't know
Yeah.
the answer until you solve it, but or
But
if you know
right,
how the
the
approach,
approach has
right?
to be that. And the more time you have to review, it helped me to have that 1 hour left, because there were some things flagged that I wasn't sure if I'm doing it right.
How
So
many questions you had flagged very quickly in the morning,
uh,
roughly?
I would say 8 to 10 questions.
So less than 10%, about 10% of the exam. No,
Yes.
actually 20% were flagged. That's not a bad place to be, which
Yeah.
means that the remaining 80% of the exam you had a good hold on, right?
Right. Yeah. I was not, second guessing other parts.
Right.
I was very sure about it.
And
So
same thing for the afternoon.
same thing for the afternoon. Yes.
That's good.
Yeah. And the other part I was going to say is that make sure you solve as many as problems as you can, and make sure you're familiar with the calculator functions, because it is going to help you a lot during
For
actual
sure.
exam. Yeah.
Yeah, and in my course, I have calculator functions, Casio at the moment. I'm going to be adding TI-36. There are a lot of students who love TI-36 as well. So that is true, and it is more true for FE electrical, I assume. But saving time helps in both exams, because over there it's roughly 3 minutes per question. Over here it's 6 minutes per
6 minutes.
question. So these 6 minutes can turn into 60 minutes if you don't know what you're doing, right?
That is
So
true.
so
Yeah, you
so
can definitely go rabbit hole. Yeah.
exactly. So in your case, because you had over prepared, done the practice and learned the concepts, I think Chaitanya, practice is one thing. And within my course, I think I have close to 1,000 problems within the course, and the study guide has hundreds of problems as well, and the computer simulator practice exam and all of that. Practice is one thing, but in my opinion, yeah, you have to really combine it. And as you said before, combine it with deep understanding. Without deep understanding, you're going to be clueless.
Mhm.
So get to the, don't jump or think about just the practice. Make sure that it is built upon a foundation of deep learning. That's the way you're going to get this done. So Chaitanya, thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate you sharing these wonderful advice. And again, congratulations on becoming a licensed PE. It's a great achievement, and it took you about a year or so. You got everything done in one shot, which is amazing, which I help a lot of my students to achieve. So give yourself some time, at least a year, to get these projects done. And once you're done, your future self is going to be thanking you like no tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you very much.